don't have to. I'm just wondering.
Kind of funny being over here by myself.
I know. What's wrong?
Okay. That's okay. That's a rousing way to start the meeting this morning. Thank you.
Oh, it's time to dance.
It is. I keep waiting for the next board member, but that's the reason I'm chairing today, is because the chairman isn't here. So good morning and welcome to the Tulare County Board of Supervisors meeting. Please stand and join the board and I as we salute the flag and then a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, as you can see, the chairman isn't here this morning. So as vice chair, I will be conducting the meeting this morning. And item number one is an outstanding item that we're happy to present this morning. The Board of Supervisors has a proclamation for Target stores for a donation that they made to the Reach Out and Read program. Is anyone from HHSA? Did you want to talk about the program, or is Ms. Igo just going to be? Igo, excuse me. Would you like to? Thank you.
Karen Elliott, Administrative Specialist with HHSA. The Reach Out and Read program is a program that we use in the health clinics. It trains pediatric primary care providers to advise parents about the importance of reading aloud to children. During their well-child visits, the pediatrician gives every child between the ages of 6 months to 5 years a new developmentally and language-appropriate children's book to take home and keep. And so this is, if they make all their well-child visits through 5 years old, they should have 9 to 10 books in their library by the time they start school. Great program.
Thank you very much. Well, it's the board's honor to present this proclamation, and I believe Danette Igu, did I get that correctly, Danette? Pretty close. Who woke us up with a nice morning sign. Well, we won't keep you from work too long, but we are very happy to have you with us this morning. As the board recognizes Target stores for their effort in maintaining literacy. We just heard an explanation. I think one of the, as part of our whereases here, every child who participates in the program will start their own library. But Tulare County has a 41% functional literacy rate, demonstrating the need and importance of the Reach Out and Read program. And I think that's one of the most important issues here. Along with the $3,500 contribution from Target, for which we are deeply appreciative. It's my pleasure to present you on behalf of my board this proclamation recognizing Target's contribution. We really appreciate it. Feel free to say something if you want.
I'll say a little bit.
You want to go to work right away.
I didn't want to go to work right away. Just wanted to let you know, if you don't know, since 1946, Target has been donating up to 5% of their income to the Arts and Education program for the communities that we have stores in. We also use a program called the Read Across America, and it's Reading Buddies. We basically, team members will volunteer and go out to the schools and work with kids and actually develop a buddy and read with them throughout the year. So we support education also through our TCO. It's called Take Charge of Education, and we donate 1% of all the Target credit card sales to the educational, the schools in our local community. So that equates to about $3 million a week. So that's an awful lot of money. So on behalf of Target, we're happy to do this. It supports all of our values, and thank you again for the recognition.
We really appreciate you being here with us this morning and the program in particular. Now, I try to take credit for this donation because I went and put on a Cat in the Hat
Oh, yeah, you read.
and read, but I was told that had absolutely nothing to do with Target's charity. So I very humbly appreciate the fact that you're here this morning. Other board members that would?
Just wondering if anybody got a photograph of that.
I'm really hoping that no one got a photograph.
You know, if you went to my store, I can guarantee you I got some photographs. I have pictures.
Okay, well, if invited again, I will participate.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Let's move to, looks like a consent calendar. Any changes or additions to the
Excuse me, Chairman.
calendar?
That
Yes.
was an action item.
That was an action item. Well, there you go. Far be it for me to not have some action. That is an action item.
Well,
Motion
move to approve.
All right.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor? Thank you for keeping me on track, Michelle. Okay, now we can move to consent calendar, items 3 through 12,
And the addendum?
and the addendum. Thank you. Oh, God, this is a group effort this morning. Everyone's helping me.
If there's no items to be handled separately, Madam Chairman, I would move approval of consent calendar 3 through 12 and the addendum.
Second.
Okay, cast your votes. Thank you. Okay. We'll then move to items not timed, item 13. Goodbye, everybody that was here. And now going back to work, thank you. Or should I have done the addendum?
Chairman and members of the board, good morning. You have in front of you a proposal to create an additional deferred compensation program for the county. For some time, the Deferred Compensation Committee that is appointed by the board has looked into some alternatives. This actually came up in earnest when the board agreed a couple of years ago to consider a match of $1,500 for its unrepresented employees into the deferred compensation program. Ultimately, we ended up with at least 50 and possibly more employees who are contributing the maximum by law as a result of the match and their own contributions. The reason that the 401A is recommended at this time is it has a different limit. It has a $45,000 limit as compared to the $15,000 limit, which goes to $15,500 next year. The beauty of this is there is no cost to the county. It's being administered by Great West that administers the deferred compensation plan, and it's purely optional for the employees. This is essentially one in a series of different items that we're going to be bringing to the board that are virtually no cost but create more options for our employees. For example, we'll be coming with a high deductible health plan and health savings account next week for your consideration. So this should be sort of looked at as one in a series of ways at no cost that we're trying to create more options for the employees, and I would be happy to respond to any questions.
Questions from the board?
No. Just for point of reference for folks, that doesn't change the county's program of paying up to $1 per $4 contribution with the maximum still being $1,500.
No change in that, and no, this is a no
Didn't want to
cost.
think folks that maybe think that it would jump to 45,000 or something.
No, well, the 1,500 is unchanged.
I think the only question I would have, I was given an explanation of part of this, and sometimes these concepts are, they sound good on paper, but they're not often easy for, to comprehend the fullness of the issue. Did I hear you say that you may be back with other things, but we're going to start with these two additions to, this one addition to what we offer?
This will be another deferred compensation program. We will be coming back with a high deductible health plan, health savings account, which will be a health plan option,
Okay.
which will be added. And we're looking, quite frankly, at other ways for low cost or no cost benefits to the employees through discounts and other things. And if there's any way we can skin the cat of reducing what it costs employees for products or services or increase benefits at no cost to us, we think it's a win-win.
Okay, great. Okay, any other questions?
No.
Move to approve. Second.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate
Hackman.
it this morning.
Mr. Marks, I think you were part of that item also? Okay. Item 14, request from Resource Management Agency. Morning.
Morning Supervisors, Teresa Simanis, Chief Planner, Resource Management Agency. This is a general plan initiation and application by Mr. Steve Penn to file a general plan amendment to change the land use designation on a 2.3 acre parcel of land south of Porterville from rural residential 5 acre minimum to industrial. The portion north of the Campbell-Moreland ditch would need to be included inside the county's adopted Porterville urban development boundary in order to facilitate this project. And this would allow for the expansion of an existing recycling facility southward. And the proposal is consistent with the City of Porterville vision for the area that's spelled out in the Porterville General Plan Update and would be appropriate under county policies. And therefore, staff recommend approval.
Okay,
Quick question.
questions from board members?
As of the printing of this document, we've not received comment from the City of Porterville. Have you since?
No, we have not.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions or discussion? Chair will entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
You guys are scaring me. Motion passes. Okay, move to item 15. Once again, request from Resource Management Agency. General Plan Amendment.
And George Finney with the Resource Management Agency. This item 15 is actually a combination of two rezoning requests that in the Farmersville area. They are from Craig Welch and Gil Reeves Company. They're on adjacent parcels on both sides of Road 162, north of State Highway 198, north of Farmersville. Both parcels total about 16 and a half acres. Both requests are to change the existing agricultural zoning to C2. However, while both sites are within the Farmersville urban area boundary, they are outside the existing Farmersville urban development boundary and also outside their existing sphere of influence. They were also designated as agriculture on both the county and city general plans for the area. Therefore, it's clearly evident that a rezoning can't proceed to establish commercial zoning until the general plan is first amended. Also, as indicated in your packet, the City of Farmersville has requested that both sites be annexed and developed to city standards. This is in conformance with your existing urban boundaries element policies that require annexation to cities for projects located within city urban development boundaries. The complicating factor here, of course, is that the site's not yet within an urban development boundary, although it's within their planning area. And furthermore, annexation is going to be a bit tricky because the site's still outside their sphere of influence. What we are suggesting is that you go ahead and allow both proposals to proceed as general plan amendments, not as rezoning. The purpose of the general plan amendment would be first to include the areas within the Farmersville urban development boundary and then designate the sites for commercial uses, but not allow the rezoning to proceed until we can determine if annexation is feasible. And that may take a bit of time because LAFCO, although it is scheduling Farmersville shortly for review of their sphere of influence, it wouldn't be changing the sphere of influence in this particular area until, number one, we had an environmental finding to support that change, and secondly, we need to have a general plan amendment that shows it within the 20-year growth area. Also, I would note, because of the odd parcel configuration, you may want to give consideration to alternative, I believe it's 2 in your report, that basically indicate that perhaps a more comprehensive review would be appropriate. We haven't reviewed the Farmersville general plan for close to 30 years now, so it might be time to do that. That's my report, unless there's any questions.
Questions from board members?
If I can, I need to make a statement first. I'm an acquaintance of Mr. Welch's. We've known each other for several years. I have seen the property. Approximately 3 years ago, our companies did do some work together, but it's well beyond the Brown Act time that I would have to recuse myself from this item. So I just wanted that to be made known for the record. I don't, looking at the 2 pieces there, I know, having looked at the piece Mr. Welch has significantly cleaned up, look at the aerial photo here, I'm finding it hard to believe that could be any kind of agricultural property, as are most of those small properties with home sites on them. So I don't know if that's been discussed with the applicant or applicants. I'm just concerned that that this be drug out for years while Farmersville, works on getting this annexed, and they've got to get utilities under the freeway, which could take a very long time. If they tried to include that with the expansion of the overcrossing, that could be 20 years. So I hate to see a project, especially the smaller one like this, put on hold for any period of time when the property has been significantly cleaned up from what it was before. So I'll just let that statement stand as that. I don't see that option 2, putting either of these on hold, as an option for me.
George, I have a question. Not going with option 2, but going with the request that's in front of us. Is there still, does that change the role of LAFCO, or will we still have to go through a LAFCO proceeding, even, no matter what the board does this morning?
If annexation is to be determined feasible, LAFCO actually would be required not only in the annexation but the sphere of influence amendment. Now, LAFCO will be scheduling Farmersville for review of their spheres probably not long after the first of the year.
If I can, Madam Chair.
Does that help with your question?
Well, it does, but the last sentence of that says, unless it is determined that annexation is not feasible. And I'm assuming that for it to be feasible, you have to have public utilities on the north side of the freeway.
Or at least a plan for how those public facilities can be provided in a reasonable.
So having a plan
Yeah.
is sufficient, even though the plan might be 20 years away?
We'll have to reserve judgment, of course, by LAFCO on that particular point, but I think that would be appropriate.
All you have to do is turn around once and you're there.
Again, as it stands right now, annexation is not feasible, so there's nothing that, as it stands now, that would prevent the board from authorizing both the general plan amendment and the rezoning. We just think that there should be some time given to work with the city to see if the annexation is feasible for.
So the burden is on the city of Farmersville to prove whether or not it's feasible or not?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Worthy?
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, the Rural Valley Lands Plan analysis that was done indicates 16 points, and it reminds again of what the points mean in terms of ain't no way in hell, yes we can, or maybe. I know there's the point systems.
Again, bear in mind these are preliminary assessments, but 16 is the cutoff point. 16 or fewer can qualify for non-agricultural zoning. 17 or more has to stay agriculture.
Well, further discussion, or?
Well, just to comment, Madam Chairman, my position has always been with an application is that the risk is upon the applicant. And the only time that we've really, in my mind, prudently said, no, you cannot go forward is when there was just no possible way they could. So if we had a Rural Valley Lands Plan number of 17 or above, and this cannot be annexed, then I would say, there's no point in wasting the applicant's time or the county's time in going forward. In this case, there appears to be the possibility that it will be successful, but there are certainly no guarantees it will be successful. And I think that's really the reason for having this kind of a process we have in our county, is to go through this kind of preliminary analysis so that we don't all waste time. But the risk, I believe, is still on the applicant. There's no guarantees. But given the information we have here today, I'm prepared to move forward and give that permission to the person to take his chances at it.
Second.
That's a motion?
I was just going to say, if that's a motion, then they have a motion and a second. Cast your votes, please. Okay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Kinney. Request from Resource Management Agency. Good morning, Mr. Fussell.
Good morning, Board. Brett Fussell, Assistant Director, Resource Management Agency. The item before you this morning is the approval of a Measure R program supplement to our cooperative agreement with the Transportation Authority to allow for staff to begin the environmental plan specs, estimate, and right-of-way acquisition for the construction of a traffic signal at the intersection of Avenue 416 and Road 56. Currently, this intersection is a four-way stop and experiences a lot of delay. We've worked very closely with Caltrans at trying to extract this intersection project out of the Avenue 416 project that we currently have underway for the project approval and environmental document with STIP funds so that we can advance it in a much more timely manner. We are requesting from the authority $300,000, which would again cover the cost of a CEQA document, plan specs and estimate, and right-of-way acquisition. We hope to be able to go to construction by late summer or early fall of 2008. And with that, I would respond to any questions that the board may have.
Chairman, Ted Smalley was speaking at my Rotary Club this morning, Sunrise Club, and so I asked him about this particular thing, and the question I had for him, which I think may have interested the board also, is that we're advancing Measure R funds to accomplish this with the expectation that we would be reimbursed then when those funds are made available from the federal earmark and different sources. Is that correct?
Now, my understanding is this project is to be 100% funded with Measure R funds, because once you spend money, you cannot ask for reimbursement.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That's my understanding of the project. I'll confirm with Mr. Smalley, but I think the intent was to do this whole project with Measure R and deliver it as a Measure R project.
So then
But
the federal earmark that was for this project gets to be redirected
Would be
someplace else?
redirected somewhere else along the corridor, that's correct.
Only one question if I can.
Please.
Does this come from our 35% pot of money?
I believe that Avenue 416 was identified as a project in the expenditure plan, and so we're advancing a piece of the 416 project out of its designated project status in Measure R. So this is not out of the 35%, but is out of the Regional Projects Fund.
And did that, I don't remember seeing that on yesterday's TCAC schedule. Will that go to the next month's meeting?
The
I would
approval
think
by
that
the
would be an
program,
amendment- That would be an amendment to the plan.
I was of the
Moving those
understanding
monies.
that this is an allowable project to proceed forward.
I would think it would be an amendment to the plan if you're going to move money forward.
Well, it's redirecting funds. 416 is among the, is in the
Right.
regional project, and this is a
Right.
part of the 416
Right.
project.
I believe
So-
it's in
So you're
the-
basically substituting Measure R dollars for this, for what was the earmark, and then you'll take the earmark and turn around and put it back
Right.
into the regional project.
So is the
Hope
county,
so. I don't want to lose the earmark.
is the county forwarding this money and the county would be reimbursed by the Measure R funds at the time they become available for that project?
My understanding is that we will be getting an allocation from Measure R now for this project, and that as we do work, we would submit invoices to TCAG/authority, and the county would get reimbursed on a current basis, not on a future basis.
Well, I'm going to assume then that this will go to next month's TCAG meeting, at which time the entire board would approve it.
I will follow up with Mr. Smalley.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further?
Move approval, Madam Chairman.
Second.
Cast your votes.
Thank you, Board.
Russell?
I just wanted to say that this is another example of the benefit of having Measure R. If we had to have Measure R and we wait for dollars to show up, projects get put on hold or they get stopped, we're able to continue to move forward because we've got our own funding, and that's just one of the great benefits of having passed through Measure R. So
We get to see them in our lifetime, you mean?
Yes.
Okay, we still have time before our 9:30 hearing, so we'll move to item 17. Request from Resource Management Agency, Mr. Finney.
And item 17 is a request for consideration of adoption of an urgency ordinance to protect the significant wildlife refuge and habitat areas in the county, and with particular attention to the Allensworth area. The ordinance would do that by prohibiting issuance of special use permits in the area to be identified. Again, the ordinance that we prepared, as you well know, since you asked for this last week, we didn't have a heck of a lot of time to put together a study of this, so we started with an ordinance that would apply to the 2.5-mile buffer zone around Colonel Allensworth State Historic Park. We realized when doing that, we were including a good portion, if not all, of the existing Allensworth community. So the board may want to consider perhaps adjusting the boundaries to exclude that area, and I would suggest if you would like to do that, you exclude the areas within the Allensworth habitat boundaries that are proposed in the general plan update that identifies all the existing developed area.
Mr. Chairman, if I may ask a question about this particular issue. As I recall, we had a study that was done to identify areas of the county for mitigation
and
banking.
I'm going to show you some slides that we didn't have available when we sent it with the packet, but you can see the areas that were identified.
All right.
Yes, because imagine my surprise when this is what was on the agenda item, because this is not what I believed I asked for.
Okay, well, again, we had 24 hours to put together this agenda item, so
I understand that, Mr.
you
Finney.
you see what you get.
But I was available all 24 of those hours.
24, huh? I'll remember that.
Cell phone never shuts off.
So in that light, I'd like maybe to turn to the alternative 2 map. Well, this is actually the series of maps that we didn't have available when you sent to the packet. Did those get handed out, the black and whites?
Yeah, this is all new, actually.
This is new information.
Been looking for this, but didn't know where it was.
These are maps out of the wildland study that was prepared for TCAG. The map on the left, well, actually, this is the proposed mitigation banks, the 3 proposed mitigation banks areas that were suggested by wildlands, one for the longhorn beetle, which does not show anything in the Allensworth area.
No, I wouldn't think so.
The middle one is for vernal pools, which you can see one area. Can you see Allensworth there? It's hard to. Can you point out where
I
Allensworth
can't
is
see
in the map?
anything there.
Not even with my glasses, sorry.
Yeah, give me a telescope.
Down a little bit. There's Allensworth right there.
On
You see
the,
one of the bank areas proposed for vernal pools was in the Allensworth area. And for the upland species, a larger bank area was proposed, all on the east side of State Route 43. The other colored blotches on the map identify lands that are owned by state and federal agencies. For the most part, those are wildlife agencies. The blue areas are owned by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. One, of course, is the Pixley National Wildlife Refuge. The golden areas are those owned by the State Department of Fish and Game. They've been picking up property out there for a while, and they refer to that as the Allensworth.
Can you point the arrow at the places you're talking about?
See those orange blotches? Those are the properties owned by the U.S. State Department of Fish and Game.
You can also find these items in Exhibit C of your package.
Well, they're black and white.
It's very
Yeah.
hard to
difficult
see on the black and white.
see.
Allensworth's not shown on.
Yeah. I mean, I have a general idea of,
If you were to go to the, might ask, if you look at the vernal pool, which shows some of Allensworth, show us where Allensworth then is located within that vernal pool crosshatch area? In the lower corner then?
Right there, at the extreme southwest corner.
Okay. Extreme southwest corner of the crosshatch
Vernal
area is where Allensworth, and Allensworth is actually a shaded area in this map, or no? It doesn't even show up, I guess, as a,
It would be within that shaded area, that's correct.
Well, perhaps right there where, I mean, since these are all the same color, but the National Park Service, so is it that, in the corner of that? Would that be the Allensworth Park?
No, the Allensworth Park does not show up on that map.
If I can, Chair, I'm
Yes.
looking here at my black and white one. There's a crosshatch area where it says proposed vernal pool mitigation bank location. Who's proposing that?
This is a proposal that was came across from the Wetlands Incorporated that actually conducted the study for TCAG. And in their study, they didn't look specifically at Allensworth, but at the valley floor of Tulare County.
I'm looking at 4 areas then on this exhibit here where they proposed,
Yeah, the crosshatched areas are the proposed areas.
and then the bottom on the southwest one there, Allensworth falls in the middle of that crosshatched area.
No, I
No,
think
they're
it's
at the
that,
corner.
She's out- just outside of it, I
Extreme
believe.
southwest corner.
the shaded area, isn't that correct?
Allensworth is not identified on those maps. Alpaw is, but not Allensworth.
No, but I mean, I can look at this map and I know where things are.
If you can see where there's some roadways that run in and out on the west side of 43, and 43 is the boundary there. That's Allensworth.
was, back to the, when the discussion was made about a mitigation bank, were there any discussions about what would be a reasonable number of acres? I mean, in other words, this would be, I look at this as saying, well, this would be sort of a maxed out area. In other words, if you were to look at, and obviously this was probably subject to further environmental analysis to determine whether or not all, because the straight lines and so forth don't usually make a lot of sense necessarily for habitat. In like 43 is this direct line across there. Was there any thought given to what would be a reasonable size of the mitigation bank in the county? In other words, you know, I know that when we look at a 2.5 mile parameter around Allensworth, we're talking about over 20,000 acres. Were we thinking in that magnitude of a
No, I
mitigation
don't.
bank?
In fact, these maps before you by Wildlands, I don't think they even thought that the entire area would be a bank. What they were providing to TCAG is a candidate area, I believe, that within that area, the county and TCAG should work together to find some properties that would best fit that particular need.
And that's
in
kind of what
terms of the size, I don't think I don't even think the Wildlands study even went that far.
My thought is that I'm trying to, it seems like the 2.5 miles is, which we thought at the time when it was submitted by the legislature was excessive. And I mean, it's hard for me to imagine that the county would want to set aside that much land in a mitigation bank. That's just a large magnitude of acres.
George is correct, if I may, in that the wildland study does not identify or recognize size. It simply looks and points to what the ecological and economic benefits potentially are of mitigation banking, and so it doesn't go into the details of considering size. That really is up require further study. But the point being is it simply looks at ecological and economic benefits to the county as well.
I guess I know when you think of mitigation banking, you think about if you're going to have X amount of development, you're going to need Y amount of mitigation land to offset that development. And I was wondering, did anybody have a number? I mean, were we thinking we needed 5,000 acres or 1,000 acres or 10,000?
Your point's well taken. I don't think Wildlands knew how much development would require mitigation, so that's why there was no size suggestion.
And also there isn't necessarily a size associated. It's not always, the ratio isn't you know, the ratio isn't always 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 acres per se. The ratio can be a variable. And so that is another reason why they haven't gone into they didn't go into the extent of looking at the acreage size or thresholds.
Well, a 2.5 just seems like an arbitrary number to me, and my concern with that also is we're right back to square one, which is what we had so much trouble with in the first place. And under this type of urgency ordinance, you please correct me if I'm wrong, but special use permit would be required if someone wanted to replace their water heater, or am I
Not the
wrong there,
water heater.
George?
A use permit would be required for any kind of confined animal feeding kind of a facility. It would be required for additional housing beyond that allowed in agricultural zones.
Construction, I mean, any of those kind of things?
Not
What about in the
ordinary-
community? I mean, if we're circling this community like that, what,
Well, that's why I suggested that the board would probably want to
Yeah.
eliminate the Allensworth area.
Any of your standard ag uses that you do, that did not require a special use permit would continue to be allowed. It was just the specialized ag uses that require the special use permit, like the animal confinement facilities plans. I don't know if packing houses and things of that nature,
Packing houses would also require use permit.
and what your interim ordinance would be doing would be putting any special use permit applications that may be filed or are currently existing basically on hold for the 45-day period of the interim ordinance. That in 45 days, the staff would come back to the board in a public hearing and to see if you want to continue and extend the ordinance, or if you want to let it expire at that time, if you want to change the boundaries that you set for the applicable area subject to the ordinance.
Madam Chair?
please?
I kind of feel like we've tossed this together pretty quick. And,
We did.
So do I.
you know, what's the issue with putting this off for a week or two? There's no, you know, we have no pending dairy right now as we sit here today. I don't seem to see that this is so urgent that we need to rush into this with my eyes wide shut, actually, at this point. So, I mean, I would like to be able to read through this and ask the questions and have, you know, enough time to do a study session maybe where we can, you know, where we can go through this. I don't actually remember this mitigation bank study.
Okay.
I know I was here, whether it was on this board or on city council before that, but, you know, I would like to have the time to look through that. So if I were to vote for this today, I would feel like I were, you know, not really knowing what I was going to vote for. So I would appreciate a little more time to more thoroughly examine this.
Well, I was there at the time, and I have the, you know, the paperwork from the mitigation study, but if I ever saw these, this is news to me, and then to just see them this morning. And of course, as I said, when I got the item, I was distressed, to say the least, which just goes to show that no good deed goes unpunished. Supervisor Worthley, you were going to say
Well,
something.
I was just thinking, that's all well and good, but it'd probably be good to give the staff some idea of our thinking too. I think it's a good idea to continue this matter for further discussion and action. I'm just going to talk out loud now in terms of my own thoughts, and that would be, when we look at this last project, which is what precipitated all of this activity, we were talking about dairies that were about 1.5 miles, proposed dairies 1.5 miles from the city, the community, rather the park. And maybe that would be a logical sort of line, 1.5 miles around the park itself as an interim emergency ordinance. That way you're not, again, the further out you go, the more impacts you potentially have on people's projects and potential projects or pending projects. And one of the things you haven't done, and maybe that would be helpful to us too at another meeting, would be to identify if there are projects that would be impacted by this ordinance that we now have on the books, that people have submitted paperwork or notice of, you know, some kind of notice to us that they're proposing to go forward with a confined animal facility or something within that 2.5 mile range. But I'm more inclined to think a mile and a half out is plenty, and then accepting out the community so that in case there's something down there, that would also have, not be hindered by this interim ordinance. My concern is that we've been there through interim ordinances before, and they tend to they go on and on and on. And so I'd rather, I think that's what I hear my colleagues saying, sort of do it right up front. And it's not like we have some emergency item where we have to act today. But I'm more inclined to think about a mile and a half sort of being the outside parameters of this area, because that's still going to be a lot of land.
Well, my intention in proposing this last week was predicated on the study and the fact that others were buying mitigation or conservation land, and it made sense to put it in a spot. And I had realized, without specific enough information, that in that area somewhere was an area that had been identified for this. My mind, as I say, I guess I'm going to have to go back and listen to the tapes and see what I actually said, felt that we were looking at the west side of the park. The west side of the park is the area that, because it would seem that actions prior to that have, for all intents and purposes, done the same protection for the park on the east side. And you have the community to the south. There is some area already in the wildlife refuge to the north of the park. So I specifically was looking at the west side of the park, obviously without the advantage of these maps that don't even identify the park anyway, to help me understand, what exactly the west side of the park placing a mitigation bank would look like.
I think what we'd like to do, if given more time, we can blow these maps up, identify the proximity of these proposed bank areas in relation to Allensworth, the park, the community, and Highway 43. And then along, I think Supervisor Worthley's comment is appropriate as well. We need to identify projects that could be impacted by the.
How much time do you believe you would need to do that, sir?
I think we have at least 2 weeks.
Supervisor Cox?
I have one other concern first.
Okay.
My other concern is as you start, let's pick any community, just not Allensworth, as you start circling these communities with mitigation banks and so forth, that stifles any kind of development, growth, improvements. Once you start limiting uses like this, now maybe that's exactly what Allensworth wants. Maybe they don't want any growth. Maybe they don't want any expansion there. But my overall concern, if you look at any community in here, you surround it with a mitigation bank, you've pretty much killed any growth, any opportunities for growth in that community. So I hope that everyone understands that if they've got wildlife to one area, this to that area, once you start stacking all these mitigation areas around a community, you're going to stifle any and all growth, any and all opportunities for anything to occur in that community. I'll leave it at that. It just needs to be clearly understood. Once you start setting up mitigation banks, that's all they can be used for. You're not going to put a store there. You're not going to put anything there. Period.
I was going to suggest that if you're going to do the maps, we may also want to look at the Greater Bakersfield Metropolitan Habitat Conservation Plan, the one they've been making the purchases under from 1994.
The people that brought this on, in my mind.
Right. They did studies which showed available habitat areas in Tulare County that they were picking up to mitigate expansion in the Bakersfield areas.
So they have a map, apparently.
There were maps in that study. I've seen one copy of it. I don't know.
Yeah, so they did a study in our county, but they didn't bother to share it with us?
I think they probably did, but it was back in 1994. And the study, when they did the study, it looked like they identified areas, but it wasn't part of because they did a habitat conservation plan, which means they identified the areas where there would be take. And that's the areas that everyone was notified for the study. But in order to mitigate the take, the destruction of the habitat or the creatures, they identified other areas that could be purchased to offset the take. So the area they identified to study was around.
Was the entire southwest Tulare County?
And then as patches in the southwest Tulare County.
Yeah.
But we
place
can-
where there people weren't sitting at
We
the
should
time.
probably pull those maps too,
We'll-
because that's
we'll
where
Be
include
those,
those
interesting
as
to
well.
see those.
Well, that's what brought, in my mind, that even brought the mitigation bank study back to mind was, I think it was the second one, Supervisor Worthley, we got one notice, I think, did the chairman get it? Somebody got it. It was a 10-acre purchase, and up to that time, of course, I've only been sitting on this board since 2001, I was unaware that you could even do that, that another county, of course, I learned a lot about eminent domain county to county with our water issue out in the Waukena area, when the city of Corcoran used eminent domain to confiscate, I like to use, confiscate some land in the Waukena area for their water supply. So I guess I just was unaware that you could just go across county lines and do that.
Yeah.
It's a learning process. Well, then we ought to just
But we,
re-annex
with
Kings
these-
County.
with
Perhaps
these
we should
additional-
just take Kings County back, since it used to be part of Tulare County.
With those additional considerations, maybe we better take 3 weeks, see if we can't get it right.
Okay. Is that,
It's fine.
That's
I
fine.
mean, there's nothing happening.
there's nothing applied
It was
for.
really kind of driven by a political issue, which is also sort of quieted down.
well, I
so-
would, it has, but I would also tell you, it was motivated on my part because I knew the study was there, knew that we had, issues coming up. As I said, I've learned this from you, Supervisor, no good deed goes unpunished. But, I apologize for not giving staff enough time, but I also am not happy with the way this came back, so. So did I hear a motion, Supervisor Cox?
Motion to continue this for 3 weeks.
Okay.
Second.
At that time, then, Mr. Finney, my cell phone will be on 24/7 should you need me.
Madam Chairman,
I think I have it.
There's someone that addresses on this matter.
Yes, ma'am. Sure.
Good morning. My name is Beverly Blake with Allensworth Pals, and I'm here with other stakeholders of Allensworth. First, we want to thank you for considering the mitigation bank to further protect the town of Allensworth. And we look forward to working with you in establishing a working relationship to discuss further development of Allensworth, including zoning and industry. We're looking at hoping to get your support to start developing tourism and the support systems and industries that would also come with that. So all of this to say that we applaud the 2.5-mile zone that you're considering, which is in line with Bill AB 576, as everyone already knows. And we applaud your being aggressive in working with the community to resolve some of the issues that we've been facing recently. So with that, we're asking in the future, as you begin developing the mitigation bank and looking at Allensworth, again, we would like to have a formal working relationship with you so that we're in on the planning from the beginning and that we're all on one accord. And again, we applaud you for the step you're thinking about taking today.
Thank you, Mrs. Blake. Okay.
Just might state that she wants me in the beginning. She's here. This is the beginning. It's quite obvious the way this
Yeah.
is getting started. It began at the last meeting with a request to consider an urgency ordinance. But I do think also that Mr. Cox's comments need to be taken very carefully because desires of development and desires of creating a conservation easement are not necessarily they could be very much like this. And so it is important to think about if there's going to be improvements to tourism and so forth, that we don't limit that type of opportunity by the creation of conservation easements. And we need to be very careful about, and that behooves us to make a smart choice up front about where we're going to put such a bank.
Okay, I appreciate that. Well, then we can move to our 9:30 timed item, which is a public hearing.